So welcome to this third part of the mini-series ABNcast we're recording with Trip.com. I'm joined again by James Spalding, who is the Regional Director for Flights at Trip.com. So far in this little mini-series, we've talked about how a customer service layer can help build an airline's premium traffic and customers and look after them. Then we discussed how working with the data that the likes of Trip.com has, airlines can also build their routes and networks and focus on hero destinations that they really want to focus on to improve profitability. In this episode, for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to talk about when things don't go quite so well, when there's disruption. We have to accept in this sector that disruption is the norm. I mean, things come out of the blue, often totally unpredictable, and there's disruption occur, and the travel industry will always be affected by that. So we have to deal with this as an industry all the time, and I guess we're getting better at it. But and part of that is that we're collaborating and using the information, the data that we have from all sorts of sources, including third parties. So, James, tell us how Trip.com can play a role when disruption occurs and when we're in the midst of that crisis. What role can you play? The airlines are obviously at the centre of it, but for Trip.com, you've got customers to look after as well as them. So how do you help mitigate the worst impact of a disruption?
I think the main thing we would say in this instance is customer service is integral to us and really important for what we do. So we want to play whatever role we can play in that situation, be it for our airline partners or more importantly for our travellers in that sense. The key thing when anything goes not to plan is to have the information and kind of know what's happening and know what your options are. So that's the important thing for us, is to kind of gather that and have it in a usable and a way that all parties can digest. Because once you've got that information, you can then make a decision on what happens next, what you need to do next, regardless of what the situation is.
Yeah, it is often is all about information and actually having access to it, and then having the ability to then pass that on to whoever needs it, whether it's one of your members of staff on the front line or via them through to the end customer. Last year we did some research amongst our readers, our professional airline readers, on how they feel when disruption happens. And it was, they are at the front line. They are the ones looking the customer in the eye and trying to deal with what are often either very angry, usually very frustrated people who've had their travel plans often majorly disrupted. So this is not easy, and we found they get a lot of sometimes, it gets quite serious. We have reports of, almost physical attacks and so on. So, and the key thing seems to be is just give us the information. If you can't give us the information, we'll get even more frustrated with the situation. I don't think the regular traveller sort of blames the airline or the airport when something outside of their control happens. They just accept that. But what they do get frustrated with is when they just don't know what the impact is going to be, like how long the delay is going to be. So, and sometimes that's understandable. You don't know yourself, but how do you play a role in giving that information to the customer in a timely manner, so that you don't have those kind of flashpoints where people are just getting incredibly frustrated with the situation?
There's a couple of roles that we can do in that environment, but I would also say that it's how we're easing the pressure from our airline partners when that situation happens. As you say, quite often a passenger can be at the airport, or they might be at home, they've not started to travel yet, it's a couple of days out, they don't know what to do. So ultimately we want to be one of the first people into that equation. We want to be their go-to. We want them to either come to us or we want to go to them and say, we've got information for you, we've got options for you, and this is what that looks like. So for us, it's helping the burden for our airline partners. Rather than them being the front line all of the time, we can step in there and take a lot of that on ourselves. And we want to, because ultimately, when we provide a good customer service experience, and we won't always give the passengers the answer that they want, that aircraft may be out of hours or there might be an operation reason for it, we can always say to them, well, you have options, and these are the options that you can look at. When they've got a voice of reassurance on that, it means that sometimes they don't need to speak to the airport. They don't need to speak to that person at the other end of the phone at the airline, because they're happy with the solutions that we put forward for them, and they can take one of those. So for us, it's about making sure that we're giving the passengers the information and taking that burden over. And that information can be to them through them contacting us or through us contacting them.
Yeah. The danger of it here is that you don't have that level of collaboration, so people get mixed messages. And as a customer, if I'm a customer of yours, I'm also a customer of the airline.
Yeah.
So there really needs to be that collaboration. Is there enough of that going on, or do you think there's a danger of mixed messages?
Again, there can be a little bit of mixed messages if people don't have the full information and where they're getting their information from. And that's why it's important to make sure that you are getting accurate and timely information from it. People might be looking at news channels and that might be inflaming a situation or the options that are out there. So going to a reliable source for that is important. And that's where we can really step in and make sure that we're providing the accurate information that we have access to. And again, technology, not just on our side, but on our partner side, be it the airport or be it the airline, has progressed so much now that you're getting information of your aircraft when they're coming into destinations. You're getting information of what your baggage carousel is before you've even got into the gate or when you're getting to your destination. So it's not always about giving information when things go wrong, although that is what we're talking about and the important part, but it's also how we're providing the information that's useful to a traveller at the right time. This is something that we really excel in.
Yeah. We are seeing a lot of improvements in that. So, the number of airline apps now tell you if your aircraft is on the way, if it is delayed, and, you get a very early indication of which gate you're at. So that gives you the reassurance this is happening now, even though there may be a delay happening. But they may look. But the airports also plays a role in this. So there is a need for different parties to come together. How do you make sure that you are the sort of the trusted source of information? Is that about brand loyalty? Is it about timely notifications about what is happening?
It's all of these areas, and I would say that by doing some of these areas, that's sowing the seed to the traveller that we've got the information, we're providing it to them, and then as soon as they see that notification on their phone or that email come through, then if they've got a question, then they can quite easily link through that to speak to ourselves. Right. If you've got the Trip.com app on your phone, in any destination, as long as you've got internet connection, you can speak to our contact centre. So you don't have to worry about roaming charges if you're overseas and something happens. But ultimately, if your flight's disrupted and we need to get information to you, maybe your flight in 2 days' time has been cancelled, then we'll start sending messages to our travellers. And the way that we tend to work in this environment is we'll get hold of them, we'll send 3 messages to them, and if they've not acknowledged it or replied to us, then what our pledge is to contact them, to do an outgoing call to them, so that we can have that conversation with them. Do you know that there's been a change to your itinerary? So sometimes the airlines are doing this as well, but really we're saying we're stepping in and doing it ourselves, because if a passenger knows to come through to us, then they know that we can help them with what their options are in that situation. And an airline can normally...
If there needs to be some rebooking or rescheduling. So sometimes we are in situations where people don't know what's going on. If it's an emerging situation, there's plenty of examples of that. And so the question is, who knows what's going on? Are there times when, as a Trip.com or as a third party, you know more than the airline, even though it's very much an airline issue? You actually know more than they do. So therefore, you do provide value in terms of providing that information to customers.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that it's not necessarily about knowing more than them. It might be the person actually in the airport at the ticket desk or at the gate that is limited because they've not looked at their messages. But quite often it's understanding what the policies are or what the options are. If there is disruption, voluntary or involuntary, normally an airline would issue this is what you can do in this situation to their agency partners who've got tickets booked through them. And sometimes that has a bit of a delay in kind of coming through. So again, it's managing the expectations and saying to the travellers, these are your options right now, and also this may change. We don't have all of that information cascaded down from the airline. They've not come out with any of their official policies yet, if it's within an hour or two of an incident happening.
Yeah. So there is the getting the information about what's going on currently, but then there is that mitigating aspect to it in terms of rebooking, rescheduling. Bags is always a big issue because the bag is in the system. The customer. It's one of the highest stress elements of travel is baggage. Actually, I think CETA put out a report recently saying it's always the top 3 areas of anxiety for a traveller. What's going on with my bag now? And what you tend to find is if there's been disruption, your bag won't necessarily follow you. But one of the frustrations is you don't know that until you get to the airport and find there's nothing on the carousel.
Absolutely.
Are you working on that element so that the customer's reassured as they land? So look, your bag's not coming with you. Go home and we can sort it out later. And again, that's kind of customer service that people are looking for.
Yeah, a lot of these pain points, we work very closely with our airline partners to understand how we can mitigate some of these challenges. With baggage and in situations like that, there's limited information that we could have on the airlines operation where that bag is and into their systems. But ultimately, if there's messages from the airline that need to go to the passenger, then we can play a part in giving that information. And we are looking at solutions whenever it comes around to baggage to seamlessly get rid of kind of pain points for our travellers. And that can be sometimes working with the airport or also working with the airports themselves, because every airport has got a slightly different infrastructure, way of working. They might be a hub rather than a point-to-point destination. So these are important topics for us that we definitely want to kind of experiment more in.
One of the interesting with bags that CETA was pointing out actually in their report was lots of people have tracking devices in their bags now. So actually, they almost know more about where their bag is than the officials do, or the airport does. They can see it on their phone. Well, I can see exactly where my bag is. How come you can't tell me? So sometimes it is the system allowing that information to flow through. And if a customer feels that like they're not getting information they think should be available, that can just make the situation a lot worse, can't it?
Yeah. And again, in that sense, it's managing passengers' expectations, and also if it's something that we can't directly help them with, making sure that they know where they can go for some of that information. It might be the airport, it might be lost property, it might be something that's going down that route. But ultimately, when it comes to baggage, we're always explaining to our passengers during the booking process, and then as I say, we get the messages. This is where the baggage carousel is going to be when you get to your destination.
Do you have any sort of recent examples about how Trip.com the system has come into operation when there's been disruption? We've seen some incidences, I mean, we had the incident at Heathrow not so long ago when the fire took Heathrow out for 48 hours or so, and that causes unbelievable amounts of disruption. The logistics around it are almost mind-boggling. The amount of people and bags and logistics that impacts. Do you have some examples of how Trip.com has reacted to those situations?
Yeah. I won't give specifics, but in general, kind of how we operate in these situations. One of the first things we do is produce incident reports internally ourselves. So that tells us which passengers are impacted, either down route or about to travel or about to kind of return home. So we kind of know the landscape of what that looks like for our travellers. We then kind of understand exactly what their booking profile is and any kind of knock-on impact that have. If they're not going to hit this flight, then do they have another connecting flight or something else in there? And again, these are the kind of the next stages that we look into for it. And then it becomes an element of, do we need to contact the traveller, or are we waiting for them to contact us? If a passenger hasn't started travel, then they might want to pick up the phone and say, this is the situation, I've heard about Heathrow incident, does it impact me? So we can give them some information on that. We can also give them an understanding is their flight operationally still going to go? And then refer them to the trip resources where they can keep an eye on that at the same time for it. Ultimately, if a passenger is directly impacted by an incident, then again, we'll look at exactly what we can do. And it won't always be the same as what the airline has, because the airline will tend to look at their own network and their options that they have. But being a one-stop shop OTA in that sense, we can say to them, you have other options, you have other modes of transport. If it's just a domestic flight, then maybe get the train somewhere, maybe hire a car somewhere. So we can always kind of help passengers with some of those options as well. You
mentioned before sometimes a customer might want in a situation to speak to somebody. That's great, that's great service. Not always possible, especially you've got to react to this, so that has an impact on your availability there. I mean, phoning a call centre is often not the greatest experience if there's the capacity to answer those calls isn't in place. So I'm sure Trip.com is ready to react to those things, but at the same time you want to sort of mitigate the impact on call centres. So how important is it to give customers a sort of self-service approach here? So provide them with the technology in their own hands to self-serve when these things happen.
Yeah, that's really important. And again, when you see an incident happen, you do see that spike in the contact centre. So they're staffed. Our contact centres globally are staffed to a level of what is business as usual. individual.
Right.
So you don't always, if you get a spike in calls coming through, then that could have an impact on the service levels we provide.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we have multiple ways that a passenger can contact ourselves. It can be messaging through the app, it can be through emails, and our service agents, they're able to handle multiple calls or tasks at the same time. So if they've got an instant message conversation that's happening here, they might be able to do 3 or 4 of them at the same time, and that really does take the burden off some of the contact center in terms of speaking to someone. Sometimes a passenger wants to speak to someone, and again, this can be market, cultural, and generational led in terms of how they interact with their provider. So we'll make sure we've got all the solutions for them, and ultimately we have quite high self-service levels in terms of how quickly does it take us to pick up the call, and are we able to help them on that first on that first contact? Are we able to give them an answer to the question that they have, or do we need to phone them back at some stage?
Yeah. Is there a lot now a customer can do though, just on tech itself to self-serve? I mean, things like rebooking and
absolutely
and reorganising a transfer, because obviously that change, or car hire and so on. You know.
There are a lot of complicated itineraries and complicated travel scenarios where it's not easy to do that, but actually the vast majority are self-serviceable, and some distribution technologies like NDC, we look at not just kind of the connectivity and the content that's coming through, but also the serviceability of those bookings. Can a passenger self-service? If we're getting the information, if we're getting the policies through, can a passenger go, oh, there's my alternative, it's just going to be 3 hours later on the same carrier, and I can just kind of click on that. Then if that function exists, then we provide that to our traveller. So if the airline's able to do that in their connectivity and their distribution, then yes, we can pass that on to the traveller.
What's the link between being able to, what's the link between reacting well in these disruptive situations and providing the great customer service to loyalty to brand? I guess if you do it as a Trip.com for a customer of yours, they'll be loyal to Trip.com. But then also, is there sort of a knock-on effect loyalty to the airline, because they feel like it came together and the airline actually helped me to mitigate? I
would like to think it definitely has that effect, and ultimately that's where we offer brand value to our airline partners through the strength of our customer service. The main comment I would say on that is we've been in operation now for well over 20 years, and customer service is really our foundation. It's why we've got to where we are and who we are, because if you give someone good customer service, then they're going to come back to you. They'll have that reassurance, and then you'll get them as a direct traveller, you'll get them into your brand, and you create that loyalty, as you say.
Yeah. So what are we going to be seeing in the future, you think, in terms of how airlines react to disruption? Things can't stand still. Things are always hopefully going to get better. What do you think customers are going to be offered in the future when these sort of things happen?
I think again, it's given them choice. One of the things I would say in this area is there is a lot of information out there, and passengers want options to how they can get the information. So our preference is them to come through to ourselves and us to help them where we can in that. But ultimately, they might want to reach out to the airline directly or use the airline's kind of communication channels to get information. I think the key thing in this area is passengers will have a certain preference. Do they want to speak to their agent? Do they want to speak to the airline or the person that's closest to them at the airport, and our objective is to try and make sure that they can rely on us and know that they're going to get reliable, timely information from us.
Yeah. What's your sense in terms of, from the consumer generally, what the reputation of aviation in terms of how it reacts to disruption? Because they'll compare that to other aspects, other sectors like rail and so on. They use all the time. But do you feel, although the industry will always want to do better, that actually it's got a decent reputation in terms of how it does react when disruption happens, or is there still a sense that it's not doing well enough?
Yeah, I think logistically and operationally, aviation can be quite complex, and it's not a bus service where you can just step on the next one when it comes along. There's a lot of, especially when you're going from one country to the next, there's visa requirements, there's transit requirements, there's all of these kind of unknowns that come into it. Yeah. So I think that what we've done in our industry is we've built the resilience, as you said earlier, but also the ability to understand where there might be gaps. And that's why we're all kind of experts in what we do, because some of these things won't be obvious to the traveller. So it's almost saying to them, well, do you realise that you need to consider this? And these are some of the areas that we want to make sure that the passengers are aware of, and that's why we're adding value to themselves as a provider, a service provider, or the airline themselves direct.
Yeah, we operate in a very much a networked industry. It's, by definition, it's global. So you're probably only as good as the weakest chain in the link, or link in the chain. So it's actually a requirement that the entire industry across the globe moves in that direction. Do you feel as that sense of collaboration that the industry generally wants to improve on this? And therefore, it will get better, and we will see improvements.
I do, and I think that different organisations, I'll use that word, will have different motives for it. It might be an airport, or it might be a destination. They want to bring travellers into their area. It might be an airline because they want to improve their efficiency or how they're acting in a situation. But ultimately, as you say, there's many different moving pieces, and the challenge we have with that is everything's always changing. So that jigsaw pieces fit together slightly differently. So everyone is trying to, one, innovate to kind of stay ahead of the game and to kind of make sure they're offering good solutions, but two, also make sure that they're helping to kind of shape that for what it looks like in the future. You want to stay ahead, but you also want to create a better experience for everyone. And I think that when a lot of organizations use that mentality of putting the customer first and making sure that it's being built around their experience, that is where that collaboration comes through. It is a very messy kind of connectivity kind of environment, but when we've all got that same objective of making it a better experience for the traveller, then you can normally find a path.
But the challenge of, in the first of these episodes in our mini-series, we talked about rising expectations of the consumer when it comes to the experience, and particularly in premium experiences. So actually the expectations are constantly moving on, and the industry is sort of almost trying to keep pace with that. Is it possible, do you think, to really meet customer expectations that are continually going, improving or increasing? Or are we always going to be playing catch up?
To a certain extent, I think we're always going to be playing catch up, because once you start standing still, then that's when you start falling behind, because everyone else is still moving and the industry is still moving. And I think that's the kind of the wonderful industry that we work in, but also the challenge, as you say. We had a conversation ourselves previously that where do you choose to invest? Because you can't always invest in everything. So how are you spending your resources? And is it in this area or is it this area of your business? And again, that is where we want to say to our airline partners, or any of our partners, what are your objectives? What are you trying to achieve? Because we might have similar objectives or resources that we can help to be that kind of sandbox test or even kind of go live situation for something.
It's interesting. We obviously we speak to a lot of the guys on the operational side and engineering and so on, and the message that's going out increasingly, and to pilots and so on, in terms of how they operate and how they fly aircraft, is look, in the end, everything is about customer service. Everything is about providing the service that the customers are expecting. And you're all in the customer service business. In the end of the day, you might be a pilot whose primary job is to fly the plane. You might be an engineer whose primary job is to make sure the engines are. But actually, in the end, it's all about customer service, because you get that wrong, that's when the business sort of falls down, and we have all these potential problems. So there's that, maybe that growing sense in the industry that's ultimately what everyone's trying to aim for. Is on-time service, and then when there are problems like that will occur, and they will continue to occur, that we react appropriately.
So I think there's
a growing sense of that in the industry, isn't there? Look, we've come to the end of our three-part series. Just a final few words, just a few thoughts on where things are in the industry at the minute. We've talked about there is good demand out there, and certainly people want to travel and people want to get back on into the air and go and visit the world and so on. There are challenges. So where do you assess the industry at the minute, where we're at in terms of growth and for the future?
It's a great question. I think what we've seen is supply and demand over the last few years has done a little bit of a seesaw, but we're now seeing it plateau. So now it's a case of the airlines are looking at how they're operating, going back to what we were talking about in our previous podcast. And ultimately, that supply and demand is on a lot of people's minds, be it the platform, the booking platform, or be it the supplier, be it hotel, rail, or flight in this instance. So for ourselves, it's how do we work together to make sure we're optimizing. It's not just about improving revenues to help the bottom line, but also the costs, how we're improving that. When we've got more stability in an ever-changing market, that's kind of my assessment of it at the moment.
But are we in an optimistic period do you feel for the industry at the moment? I mean, you've been in the industry quite a long time, so you've seen the ebbs and flows. But is this an optimistic period and people looking forward?
It is, and absolutely. There's a lot of exciting technologies. There's a lot of projects which are in the pipeline for ourselves and for a lot of our partners at the moment. So there's a lot to look forward to, and then that will really kind of help shape what happens next for the next step. But the demand is there. I think travel is a very resilient industry. That's wonderful to see, and it's something I enjoy working in. And ultimately, it does mean that we've got everyone on the side because we do have that same goal.
Yeah, fine. Look, James, thanks very much for that. That concludes our 3-part ABNcast series with Trip.com. I hope you enjoyed them, and do make sure you catch all our episodes of ABNcast. Thanks very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Cheers.